Watercolor is not an easy medium to correct. In fact, the more you try to correct your painting, the worse it actually looks. And that's why it's crucial to have a plan before you start to paint. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The 4 things that you need to do before you actually start to paint. Number 1, crop your photo. Don't feel the need to paint your photo in exactly the way it is that you took your photo. You need to remember the fact that you are the artist and you can make changes to the scene. And the first step to making changes is cropping the photo how you want it to be. An important tool to think about in this phase is the rule of thirds. And if you're not familiar with the rule of thirds, it's very simple. You take your photo and you pretty much draw a tic-tac-toe board on top of it. Where these lines intersect is where you want to have the most interest in your scene. And so by using this simple method, you can decide how you want to crop your photo. Step number 2, after you've cropped your photo, look at your painting and look at the subject and think, are there any elements of this subject that I need to move around? I can arrange the scene in however I need to make it the best painting. You don't have to paint the subject exactly like things are laid out. Already at this stage, you're making decisions on what you find most important in the scene, and you're positioning them around your painting to think about your composition. What makes the most interesting composition? And like I mentioned in the first phase, you want to put the most interest on one of these thirds. Okay, step number 3. You want to think about the large shapes and the values of your scene. Now this one isn't quite as simple as the first 2 steps. Values are the thing that's going to make your painting work. And if you're not familiar with what values are, it's simply how light or how dark something is and how those values interact and relate to each other. The first thing I suggest to do when you're looking at values is turn your photo black and white. And this helps simplify the values for us because it takes color out of the equation. We have preconceived notions on how strong we think the values are of certain colors. And by removing this information, it becomes a lot easier to actually honestly see the brightest parts of your painting, the middle values, and the darks. So one special tool for understanding values in your scene is doing a value study. And Andy Evenson is a fantastic watercolor painter, and this is what I learned from him. He taught me how to see values. And here's the premise of how he creates value studies. You leave your light values as the white of the paper. Now you identify the large middle value shape of your painting, and you paint that or draw that as one large shape in your value study. Then you go back in and add your darks and details of your scene. And now, if you can get used to creating these value studies, they are going to help you to see values a lot more clearly. When we look at our photos, we're seeing every little shape separate because we're thinking about objects. We got to stop thinking about objects and start thinking about shapes. That's a hard lesson to learn, and it's easier said than done, but the more that you practice this, the easier that it's going to get for you. Here are some benefits to finding that shape. For one thing, it brings unity to your painting. It's a lot more attractive to paint those large shapes than it is to isolate every little thing around your painting. And when you paint that way, your painting becomes disorganized and it becomes cluttered. And so by finding this middle value shape, we're actually simplifying our scene. And what's amazing is when you paint in this large shape, when you paint in this way, the brain will make the separations for you. And when you can start to paint that way, it makes your work a lot more interesting. You're not spelling out every little detail along the way. You're allowing the viewer to engage with your artwork. And that makes it interesting. And that's why it's so important to start thinking in shapes. So after you've identified the brightest areas, the large middle value shapes, and the darks of your scene, you're ready to move on to the next step. And step 4 is think through the process of painting your scene. Now that we've established the values and the shapes, let's talk about what we want to do in each phase of your painting. So I typically paint in 3 washes. The first wash is made up of all the lighter values of your scene. If you've seen any of my demos before, I like to wet down both sides of my paper, and I like to paint these values really loose, let the colors run into each other and merge on the paper. This is all about soft edges. Typically, you're not going to have a lot of hard edges. The exception to that would be if you're leaving part of your paper white because you need that strength of brightness for a particular object. But typically, I'm covering the whole paper with a light value wash. That's what I need to think about for phase one of my painting. What are the lightest values around the scene? What colors am I going to need for all of these lighter values? And after you paint this, you're typically going to let your paper dry, and then you're going to move into the phase of painting your large middle value shape. The middle value shape of your painting is the most difficult part, and here's why. It's a large shape that you're painting. So you're looking at your reference photo and your value study if you did one, and you're moving from shape to shape. You're thinking about edge, you're thinking about value, you're thinking about color, all within this middle value shape. And so thinking through these things, pre-mixing your colors, having your brushes ready to go is going to make that part of your painting a lot easier. Now, the darks. The darks and the details are what are going to create the illusion of detail and create the separations between the shapes if you need some separations. This is typically the part of your painting that gets all the attention, but none of that matters if you haven't done your work and thought about your lightest values, your middle values, all before we get to the darks. So the details get the credit. All the work with values is actually what makes your painting work. The large shape and the values, those are all key. So those are my 4 steps. Let's recap this really quick. You want to crop your photo. Then you want to arrange the objects in your scene, make any adjustments that are needed. Then you want to think about values and large shapes of the scene. You then want to think about the process of painting it. Logistically, what do I need to do to paint this? And break it down into those 3 phases. If you can do all of these steps and you have a clear game plan, you are going to have way higher chance of being successful in your painting, way less frustration. I know it's tempting to want to jump in and paint right away, but if you want to take big leaps in your work and really take the next step forward, these 4 steps can help you do that. So leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. What are the steps that you do before you start painting? Do you have any steps that you do to get prepared and think through your subject? I mentioned in the intro about the importance of having a plan when you're painting in watercolor, and that it's difficult to correct. That's kind of been the theme of all of this. Well, I want to offer one more thing to you. If you feel like overworking your painting is something that you struggle with, take a look at my free video lesson, 8 steps to avoid overworking your painting. And a lot of people have found this really helpful. So if that is something you're interested in, you want to stop overworking your watercolors, click the link below to your free video lesson, 8 steps to avoid overworking your painting. Thank you again for being with me here today. I hope you are moving forward in your painting and finding some peace in your creativity. Keep learning, keep working on it, and I will see you next time.